So today we're going to look at IT security, and before your eyes glaze over, just want to assure you this is going to be a business discussion, not a technical discussion. There's some technical things we're going to mention, and I'll be happy to give an explanation of that, and if anybody has any questions at the end, need some clarification, be happy to go over that. But this is a business discussion. This is not a technical walkthrough. You don't need to be bogged down with the technical details. Even if your comfort level with the computer is, it made a sound, what do I do? Do not worry. This is going to be something you can grasp. There are going to be some takeaways you can put into practice in your business today. So the title of today's presentation is The Walls of Troy Cannot Stand Tall Forever. Why you can't take IT security for granted. Now the question, first, let's just approach it, start off with first things first. Why even bother? You know, you're a small business. This is something big companies worry about, right? You know, staffs of thousands, got IT staff on board. If you and a few other people, is this even something you need to worry about? Well, the unfortunate answer, it is. IT security is something every business needs to take seriously. You may have compliance issues that require you to do this, but even if you don't, you're a target and you probably don't even know it. So let's look at some of the recent threats. This is just the past few months. Number one, Lenovo was caught installing software on computers that allowed companies to spy on your computer and gain unrestricted access to it. Now, the question we inevitably get is, why would Lenovo do this? Well, it's a little known fact if you're outside the industry, but the way computer manufacturers make their money now is usually not through selling the computer to you. Their margins are so slim on that, by the time they sell it to a Staples and it's sold to you, or even if they sell direct, chances are they're making very little to no money off the direct sale. However, if they charge a bunch of companies 50 cents, a dollar, $1.50 per computer to pre-install their software, well, all of a sudden, talking real money, $50, $75 per system, and that's where their profit comes from. That's why when you get a new computer, you get these just wonderful desktops filled with icons, and there's software you don't know what it is. And so what happened here was Lenovo obviously is not stupid. They're not selling you out to Russian hackers or anything. But there was a company that made its money from tracking your computer activity. They weren't taking your passwords or anything, just basically seeing where you went on the internet, generally, what you did on your computer. And this was not linked to you personally, but in aggregate across hundreds of thousands of computers, they could package this data and sell it to people. So people would know, hey, is my website affected? Is my software actually getting used? The problem is the software had pretty much unrestricted access to the computer. So a hacker could impersonate and act like they were this company and get onto these systems where this spyware was installed and take control. So it was a big security threat. Lenovo had to first say it wasn't a big deal, but then they had to backtrack, and it's just been a whole mess. And my worry whenever we see this is what we know happened. What about the ones we don't know? Now, second one is probably one you're very familiar with, the Anthem data breach at this major health insurer, Anthem. Over 80 million records, including Social Security numbers, were taken. And you can imagine the security staff that Anthem had on board, but yet they were still breached. So this was a wake-up call to those of us in the industry. We said, well, now wait a minute. If Anthem can get breached, and this can go on for literally a few months at Anthem, and you've got the Target data breach previously, Home Depot, what else is going on here? And number three, and by far the most prevalent and the most troublesome, is the attacks on Adobe software. Adobe software, chances are you've got it on all your computer systems. Adobe provides Adobe Reader, which allows you to open and view PDF files, which obviously are essential for business, and also Flash Player, which chances are is on your computer, allows you to view certain web content. And like any software, it's got what we call some holes, some bugs in it. And these holes and bugs occasionally allow hackers access to your system through flaws in the software. Now, Adobe obviously releases updates pretty quickly for this, but if you can believe it, up until maybe 3 or 6 months ago, their software did not automatically update. It had no automatic update mechanism. So what this meant is if you weren't staying on top and going to Adobe's website and installing the new version and maybe having to uninstall the old, and this is obviously not the easiest procedure and it's fairly time consuming, your computers were sitting ducks, right? They had an old version of Adobe, they had these vulnerabilities, all it takes is a hacker to finds your systems, and boom. So we've got all these threats, but I still hear several things from small businesses. And they say, well, we think we mitigated the threat, or we think for this reason we're not really a target, we're not really concerned. So let's look at that. Number one is antivirus software. Now, chances are you have this on all your computers, or at least I hope you do. I hope it's also up to date, that you renew your subscription every year, because the reality of antivirus software is if you let it go a week, especially a month, 2-3 months without updates, it's almost never useful anymore. And that's because new viruses are released every day. We're talking hundreds or thousands. So if you don't keep that antivirus software up to date, it's not going to be able to block it. The other reality is hackers have found many ways around antivirus software. Obviously, they know it's a barrier to them getting access to the system, so they found ways to get around it, to disable it. So unlike 5 or 10 years ago, where put antivirus on your systems, it's going to keep you, 99% safe, except for a really determined hacker. Well, now you've got antivirus software. While it's still needed, is not the panacea it once was. You probably also have a firewall built into most routers. But the issue is we find most small businesses, you go to Staples, you go to Best Buy, maybe even pick up the real nice router, the $100, $150 router with the advanced firewall that the clerk recommended. But these are still consumer level routers. They're designed for home use. They're not designed to protect a business. They don't have a lot of features like intrusion detection and things that you're going to find in your bigger business class routers. Firewalls also have to be kept up to date, and chances are your firewall is not automatically updated itself. So your firewall's 3-4 years old. It's kind of like your antivirus. It's not doing the same job blocking that it once was. And as I said, most small businesses we find don't have a business class firewall. They just maybe have a souped up consumer class, and it's not going to cut it for business. And by far, number 3 is the most common we hear. Well, I'm small. I'm a small business. What do I have to worry about? I'm not the FBI. I'm not this big health insurer. People don't care about my data. But the reality is, with the hackers out there, that they still care, because being small makes you an easier target. You don't have the budget for all these protections. You don't have these things in place. And we still have this outdated idea of what hacking was years ago, where it's somebody in mom's basement just doing it for fun. But hacking is a major worldwide money-making enterprise. You've got the Russian mob. You've got teams of tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands in China, dedicated to doing nothing but hacking computer systems. And one of the big ways that hackers make their money nowadays is not through just putting viruses on your computer or stealing data. It's by turning your computer systems into what we call zombie computers. Basically, they're able to get access to your systems, they install their software, and then they're able to control your computer when they want to. And by putting together tens or hundreds of thousands of these computers together, and trust me, they're very efficient at doing this, they're then able to direct attacks against governments, against other businesses, and they're able to gain access to those through these computer systems. And the reality of it is, you probably don't even know that you're infected. We tend to think of viruses as generating all these pop-ups, things like that. And the reality is some of them do that. Some of them really let you know they're on there. Some of them make their money by prompting you to purchase their quote-unquote antivirus software, which is the virus itself. But most hackers want to never let you know they're on your systems. Obviously, if they alerted you, you'd do something to clean it up. So as far as you're concerned, you're clean. But trust me, we go into businesses all the time. It's part of our standard management plan, and we'll do a cleanup. And I'll have the owners or the managers tell me, hey, look, our computers are clean, but just put your antivirus software on there, do what you need to do. And then inevitably within 24 hours, we've got some scans run, and we find virus after virus, spyware program after spyware program. And it's almost impossible to tell you where those came from or how long they've been on there. So your business is at risk. And depending on the virus that's found, somebody could have had access to the private information you've got. And trust me, As a small business, you still have private information. You've got client information. You've probably got credit card information, at least that passes through your systems. If you're subject to HIPAA, you've got compliance issues there. You've got all sorts of things that you have to make sure you do. And imagine reporting a data breach. Right? You've got your bigger companies, your Targets, your Home Depots. They can weather this millions of dollars. It sure hurts their stock price. It certainly hurts their cash in the short term, but they can do it. Imagine sending out a letter to your clients or your customers that, hey, we found a potential data breach. Your data might be at risk. And then imagine just a few of those, a handful, turning around and suing you for that, or even just taking their business elsewhere. It's why the vast majority of small businesses that suffer a data breach go out of business within a span of a few months. Because once that trust is broken, that's what you've got going for you. That's why people come to you. And as I said, not to freak anybody out here, not to be alarmist, but a lot of this stuff is on your systems and you don't even know it, and that's a big problem. So let's look at what constitutes an IT security strategy. Now, there are a lot of pieces on here. Don't want you to get nervous about them. Don't want this to be overwhelming. We're going to go through some of these. A few of these, like the antivirus and firewall, we've already touched on. We're going to go into some of these in more detail. And a lot of these you can do for free or low cost. In fact, we're going to talk about some of the things you can do today to start taking steps to secure your systems. But let's first talk about budgets in the lower left corner there. First question I get asked, how much is this going to cost? Obviously, as a small business, you don't have thousands of dollars a month or thousands of dollars a year to spend on IT security. So you've got to find something that fits your budget, that protects your systems. And there are things out there. We're going to talk about a few of those things. A few of them are free, a few of them are low cost, but there's quite a bit now that fits the small business budget because companies have realized, hey, this is a big market, and it's a real concern to protect these businesses. You need something in your strategy that's flexible. A lot of times when we talk about IT security strategy, people picture being systems locked down, right? Nobody getting work done without having to enter a password 2 or 3 times. That's not what we want. We want things to be secure, but we've got to strike a balance between productivity and security. We want to protect your systems, keep everybody protected, but we also want people to be able to do their jobs, right? IT security shouldn't mean that people take 4 or 5 times as long as they did before to protect their systems. Let's begin by looking at education, because this is one of those things that you can do right off the bat, is employee education. It's one of the biggest returns on investment, too. It takes a little bit of time, but it pays off big, because if your employees are educated, you can keep a lot of these threats off your systems just without even having to do anything extra other than just letting your people know and having some basic protections like antivirus software and a good business firewall in place. We've got 4 things here, passwords. First thing you want is a secure password. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, a good password protects against 2 things. First of all, it protects from somebody in the office who knows you guessing what your password is. So no more using your kids, your grandkids, your dog, your cat's name in that password. And second, a good password protects a hacker from trying what we call brute force attacks, basically continuing to try passwords over and over again. Now, inevitably, when I talk about this, people say, oh, I need one of those complicated passwords, just a random letters and numbers and some capital letters and some symbols. You can have that, but a good secure password doesn't have to be that. It just has to be something that's not easily guessed or common. The most common password is password, followed by password 123, followed by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Don't use things like that. Use something that you know, but that people who know you wouldn't easily guess. And most importantly, use a different password for each system and website. Now, you're going to say, Chris, how in the world am I supposed to keep track of all that? It's very easy with a password manager. We're going to talk a little bit more about this towards the end of the presentation, but there are password managers out there. LastPass is one. 1Password is what we use at the office. There is a cost initially to the software. There's no ongoing fee, but it just makes life easy. You can manage all those passwords. It can automatically fill it in for a forum or a website you visit. And even difficult passwords, even ones that you might think off the top of your head, I'm never going to remember this. With repetition, you'll be surprised at how you can remember these passwords. Teaching your employees safe surfing is one of the best things you can do for your company. Shopping and social media sites are just two big areas where what we call malware, these viruses, these spyware, these hackers can come in by somebody clicking the wrong link. So teaching your employees what legitimate websites look like, what to look for, if a pop-up happens, what to do. It's real easy stuff. It's not technical, but it just takes some practice. So for example, we've done a guide for our clients that goes over several of these steps, what to look for in email, what to look for in safe surfing, what to handle with passwords, what fake antivirus alerts look like. And that's something I'd love to give to you. You're going to get my email here at the end of this talk. Just go ahead and shoot me an email. I'll be happy to send that to you because it's something you can go over with your clients. We've got pictures. It tells you what to look for, why something's dangerous. We found it just fantastic at helping our clients and their staff stay safe. Email is a huge area where viruses come in. Somebody clicks a wrong link, somebody opens an attachment, and the old rule used to be if you don't know who it's from, don't open it. And that's still a good rule, but we've modified that slightly. If you weren't expecting it, don't open it. Because now a lot of viruses are transmitted from people you know. In fact, the other day I got an email from a friend of mine who works at an internet service provider, and somehow her account or her computer had been compromised, and she was sending out links that somebody could click on, and then they would get their credit card information stolen if they actually entered the information into the form. So that's a pretty big deal there. If you're not expecting it, even from somebody you know, do not open it. Just open up a new email window, type them up a little email, send them a thing saying, hey, I got this from you, I got this attachment, or I got this email from you with a link. Did you mean to send this? Worst case, takes a couple hours, they get back with you and say, yes, we did mean to send it, and you go ahead and open up the email. But too many people see something from somebody they know, somebody they usually communicate with, they just click the link, and all of a sudden they've got a computer infection. And as I said, sometimes you won't even know it. Sometimes a pop-up will flash up, there's something that gives the telltale sign, your computer starts to slow down, you start to notice you can't open files you could before. But a lot of times it's just silently downloaded, a thing where a hacker now has control, and it could be weeks or months before you ever notice it. So teach your employees, if you weren't expecting it, just don't open it. And finally, updates. Programs just beg for updates constantly, it seems. And it can be real tough to know what's legitimate or what's not. It's why you want to set a regular update schedule for your systems. So if somebody sees a pop-up on their screen, they know, well, okay, this is on a Tuesday and we update on Friday, so I can just close and ignore this. Because what will often happen is there'll be these fake updates that come through. And unfortunately, before you know it, you've got a virus on your system from these fake updates. So set a regular schedule. Make sure now that Adobe finally auto-updates, your programs are set to auto-update. And this education, just going over with new employees, talking with your current employees about some of these practices, making sure everybody's got a secure password, and having one place that a manager or yourself, maybe as the owner, keeps those passwords, so if somebody leaves, you've still got access to those systems. This is what you've got to do. It's a little bit of time, but most of it's completely free. Worst case, you paid a little bit for a password manager. Let's go back to this IT security thing. We've got web filtering, which we're going to talk about here in a minute. We talked about updates. Let's talk about mobile devices. Mobile devices are a big area of concern now, believe it or not. Everybody's bringing in their smartphones, their iPads, and they're connecting to your Wi-Fi network. And if you're not careful, they can transmit something onto your network through that. But believe it or not, our bigger concern with mobile devices is someone being lost or stolen. So most people, you have a smartphone, you've got your email on it. Maybe you're kind of advanced and you've got access to some files now on it through a Dropbox or a Box.net or similar service. Imagine if somebody gets a hold of your phone or your tablet. All of a sudden they've got access to all that information. So you need some way, even for devices that employees own, to kind of lock those down. You need to start mandating passcodes for these devices. I know it's a little bit of a pain in the butt for people that have to enter that to unlock their phone if you don't have something like an iPhone with the fingerprint reader. But trust me, we had a client just, I believe, last month that called up in a panic. Their iPad had been stolen out of their home. Thankfully, we had some mobile device tracking installed on this, so we were able to find out that it was at a pawn shop. They were able to get in touch with the pawn shop as well as the police, go down there, find out who had sold it. They were able to lock their iPad before that ever happened, so if somebody had actually been able to get on it, wouldn't have been able to get into the iPad. They could turn it on, but they couldn't actually get into it and read their emails or check for anything. And ultimately, they were able to recover that iPad. And last I checked, that was working its way through the legal system. They actually caught the perpetrators. But imagine that, out of your home. It doesn't have to be just you leave it in a hotel room. Now let's talk about compliance. Now this may or may not be something you're subject to, but chances are you've got some compliance issues. If you process credit cards, you're subject to PCI compliance, subject to certain rules. If you deal with any sort of patient information, whether you're attorney, medical practice, or you do work for these companies, you're probably subject to at least some of the HIPAA regulations. And then, of course, we know for financial services, there's all sorts of different things, and there may be something specific for your industry, an association you're a member of. So compliance is a big thing that people often don't think about. They often say, hey, I've got antivirus and firewall. But as you can see, that only takes you 25% of the way there. There's more that needs to be done. We can get to 50% by doing the employee education and also putting some web filtering in place. Web filtering software is not what you think of from 5 or 10 years ago, where maybe you put it on your kid's computer and then all of a sudden they couldn't do a report because the web filtering was blocking something legitimate. Web filtering software now is very smart, it's very affordable, it's very easy to put in for businesses. In fact, there again, if you have a business class firewall, you're probably going to have this built in. Maybe there's just a small yearly fee, but you can set up to block certain sites and to allow certain computers unrestricted access. It's not always the easiest thing to set up, but usually once you set it up, as long as you get the updates, it works well, and it's a great way to keep your systems protected because it blocks any, if a virus gets onto a system, it blocks it from contacting its home base and somebody gaining access to your system, and it blocks a lot of these pop-ups and these viruses. You know, somebody accidentally clicks an email link. Well, this web filtering software, in addition to your antivirus, can hopefully catch it. 75%, we need to do intrusion detection. See if people are trying to get into your network. Our clients are always amazed that the first month or two after signing up for one of our services, they'll get this report and they'll see like 3,000 attempts in the course of a month to get into their network from China or Russia. They say, we're small, why would somebody do it? Well, these groups just scan the internet looking for vulnerable systems and networks that they can add to their zombie computer list, or that they can see if they can get in and take over. You've got to have intrusion detection built in at the firewall level. If you have a server, it needs to be enabled on here. And you may or may not be aware, but HIPAA requires you to get a security audit once a year and have something like this done. Somebody actually tests, tries to get into your network, see what the vulnerabilities are. Talk to doctors' offices all the time, these independent medical practices, smaller ones that say, oh, well, we're HIPAA compliant, and they've taken all these steps. But they don't get that annual audit. And if you're ever audited and they find out you don't have that annual audit, you don't have a record, you don't have documented steps, and these are multi-page reports that these should be given in this annual audit, that show what you've done and what you did to remediate and fix any of these issues, you're still in big trouble. And with HIPAA fines starting at a minimum of $50,000 per incident, it's a big deal. It's something that you've got to do. If you're required to be compliant, even PCI compliance, if you fail that, you're in big trouble. Your business may never be able to process credit cards again. You could be looking at fines. You could be looking at having to send out notices to your clients. This is big stuff. It isn't stuff that you can just mess around with anymore and hope for the best and say, well, we didn't know. Ignorance is no excuse for these auditors anymore, and believe me, we're seeing more and more of these audits. So finally, 100%, you get full compliance. You add up these steps, got your employees educated, you've got IT security protocols in place, you've got this documented. Congratulations, you can feel safe. You've got compliance. Let's talk about the security funnel here. So at the base, It's kind of like a pyramid almost, right? So at the base, we've got our antivirus and firewall, basic things you should be doing. Then we've got our regular updates. Got to make sure those are done. If you don't, well, hackers can get access to your systems. Most of these security updates are meant to patch these sorts of things. They're not meant to improve performance usually, improve compatibility. They're meant to block somebody gaining access to your system. Some of them are more major than others, but you need to make sure for Windows updates, Adobe, if you've got other software like QuickBooks that allows for automatic updates, have that enabled. And for goodness sake, don't wait several versions of software to update. I know people that were still running QuickBooks 2009 or 2010 a year or two ago, and they said, we don't need to update. But these new versions, yeah, they may change the interface around. They may add some bells and whistles. But the biggest thing is they provide you better security and keep your systems protected. Ideally, you've got some web filtering in place. It obviously helps with productivity. If people aren't on Facebook all day when they're supposed to be working, that helps. But also, you're keeping these viruses out. You're keeping hackers out. And also, if you've got that compliance piece, you're showing, hey, I'm taking proactive steps to keep our system safe. Moving on up, hopefully you've got some sort of mobile device management. At least you have restrictions in place. Even if you don't have any software to maybe manage this, you let employees know you got to have a passcode on your system if you're going to access work email or work resources. You've got a plan in place for dealing with a lost or stolen device. And then up at the top here begins with employee education. Got to have that piece. So let's look at what this looks like. So got all our network traffic here. In red's our bad traffic, blue's our good traffic. And yes, there's a reason that red traffic is more. The majority of network traffic is still going to try to be malicious getting into your network. It's just amazing the amount of attacks that a good firewall will block. You don't think people are trying to get into your system until you start monitoring it and looking at it, and it's absolutely insane. So we've got all this. It filters through the funnel. We've got all our protections in place, and only clean network traffic, only good data is coming through. We're blocking those viruses. We're making sure everything's safe and protected. So one last look at this IT security strategy. This isn't something that you've got to do it all at once, but you need to have a plan in place to build towards it. As we've looked at, the education, it's free. It takes some time. Updates, those can be enabled automatically. Worst case, you get a company like ours out for a little bit, have us make sure that's working, take care of it. Web filtering, it's usually a one-time setup then, unless you get new computers or you have to swap out your firewall. Antivirus software, you just keep it up to date. Firewall, you make sure that's kept up to date. So there's not a lot of things. Once you have it in place, you just have to keep it going, monitor it, document it. But you can't take it for granted that you're too small. As I said, we see clients all the time when we monitor their networks, people trying to get in. I can't tell you exactly why they're trying to get in, but they're trying to get in. And if they get in, that's a breach. You're out of compliance. You're looking at fines if that's detected by an audit before you're able to correct that. And again, we've constantly got this balance, productivity versus security. But there is a balance to be had. You can put these into place without having to worry about your people having to fill out 15,000 passwords. If you use a password management system, it makes it fairly easy. So let me just briefly talk about how we help with this, because just depending on your technical savvy, your knowledge of this, you may be feeling a little overwhelmed, and I can completely understand that. So we help our clients with their IT security strategy a few different ways. First of all, we make sure they've got updated antivirus and firewall. We make sure those are set up properly. We don't want to be blocking legitimate things, somebody trying to download an actual file they need to download. We don't want to be blocking that. We also don't want to let a virus into the system. So we set up those rules properly. We monitor it. If something major is detected in the system, we can go in and do a bigger cleanup, do a bigger risk analysis, make sure this isn't a bigger breach than we think. We're going to provide those regular updates to your systems. Make sure all that's kept up to date. There's so many programs out there that need updates, so we're going to make sure that's working. We're going to test these patches before we roll them out. Occasionally, it is rare, but it does happen. You'll have a patch that rolls out and it actually causes more problems with some sort of program, causes something to stop printing or a program not to launch. So we check that for our clients beforehand. I mentioned we have that employee education document. Again, email me. You'll have my email here at the end of the slide deck. Email me for it. I'll be happy to share it with you. But we educate not just managers, but staff about, hey, here's the steps you can take to keep your system safe. This is what a virus pop-up typically looks like. This is what to look for in an email as to whether it's legitimate or not. And the best part is, most of our clients will forward us emails all the time. Hey, I got this. Is this legitimate? And it's great because we can write back and say, yep, that's fine. Thanks for checking. Or no, delete that. You do not want to click it. That is trying to transmit a virus or steal some data. We'll help you with these compliance issues. It can seem overwhelming if you read through the list. If you've ever done, say, a HIPAA yearly audit, or you've done even a PCI yearly check, they usually send you a survey to make sure you're compliant. If you've actually gone through that and tried to do what it says, it's a lot. But we go ahead and take care of that. We make sure everything's good. We document what we've done. So if you ever face an audit, one of these compliance bureaus, you're good to go. You're golden. We're going to monitor 24/7. We're going to check, make sure everything's protected. As I said, we're going to see about intrusions. We're going to see if something maybe slips through, what we need to do to beef up defenses. And finally, we're going to find something to fit your budget. This is not an expensive thing. This is not a bankrupting thing. You should already have some money set aside or be able to find some money for this. It's not a massive upfront cost. It's not a massive ongoing cost, but you've got to put this in your budget for some IT security. So let's talk about 6 tips you can use right now. These are free, most of them at least. Certainly there's no cost from our end for you. Just things you can do right now. We talked about the first thing is passwords. Make sure you've got secure passwords and make sure that they're different for each site and for each software package. Keep your software up to date. Enable automatic updates. Install a program that says, hey, do you want me to check automatically for updates? No, it can be a pain sometimes, especially if you've really got to get something done, but let it check for updates and don't keep your software around for years without upgrading. I know there's a cost to these upgrades 9 times out of 10, but trust me, in addition to new features, which you may or may not take advantage of, there's security fixes. And once somebody stops releasing updates for a system, you're in trouble. We still will occasionally see Windows XP computer systems. Because Windows XP is popular. People say, I don't feel comfortable with Windows 8, or I don't feel comfortable with Windows 7, or I just don't have the budget for that. The problem is Windows XP now is going on a year where it hasn't had any updates, and it was already a pretty insecure operating system, very vulnerable. So you're just a sitting duck if you've got any Windows XP systems on your network. You need to take care of that as soon as possible. Use a business firewall. If you've got something you just bought at Staples or Best Buy and it doesn't have business on the name typically, or it's not from a company like a SonicWall or a Zyxel or a Netgear business class, find somebody who can put in a business class firewall for you. It's one of the easiest upgrades you can make, but you need to take care of that because these little ones that you spend with the consumer level, not going to do anything for you. We talked about it, use unique passwords, but how do you keep track of all that? Get a password manager. There are free ones out there. Do your research. Some of those free ones aren't so great, but there's LastPass. A few of our clients have used KeyPass with good success. We use 1Password here, which, as I mentioned, there is a cost per computer that you have it on, or if you want to put it on your mobile device as well, your smartphone, so you look up your passwords. But it's not that big of a cost, and the fact that you can just easily fill in your password, you can have unique passwords. For 1Password, and maybe for other services, they will even alert you if a site has been hacked and you need to change your password. So, I mean, it's not a huge amount in the grand scheme of things. They don't upgrade that often where you'd have to pay for an upgrade. It's just something you need to do. Now, I want to talk about this 5th one because this gets a little technical. But let's say you take your laptop to the Starbucks or you're going to a conference. You'll hook up to the hotel's Wi-Fi or Starbucks Wi-Fi, and you'll check your email and maybe download some files, maybe check your online banking. What you don't know is that when you do that, you're leaving yourself vulnerable to somebody sitting around the area of that network and just pulling off all your information, grabbing your password, that sort of thing. You need to protect yourself. And the way you protect yourself is getting a VPN software. You can get this for mobile devices, so like your iPad, your cell phone, when you're connected to unsecured networks, public networks we call them. And you can get it for laptops. Now, there's a variety of services out there. I can't say I recommend one over another. There's usually a small monthly fee for these. Sometimes if you're not going to use it that much, you can get away with the free version of these. But what a VPN does is it encrypts your traffic going out over these connections. So if somebody's sitting there, they're snooping, they're trying to get passwords, and trust me, they could be. You don't know. It's not necessarily something you can see. Somebody could be out in the parking lot getting this. This VPN keeps everything secure. There's a little bit of setup, but this software is pretty easy. Even if you're not that technically savvy, you can usually set it up yourself. It's just a matter of remembering when you connect to a new network to go ahead and enable this. So when you're at the hotel, okay, let me enable my VPN connection. When I'm at a conference, let me enable my VPN connection. And it helps keep you secure. And finally, we talked about it. We spent a good amount of time on it, but you want to educate your employees. And remember, you can email me to get that free guide. Keeping these viruses off your networks, helping spot viruses, helping spot potentially spam emails, that sort of thing. But you've got to educate your people. So that really wraps it up for us. I know this has been a lot to cover. I really appreciate your attention. I appreciate the fact that you're able to stick with me. But remember, it doesn't have to be that complicated. If it's something you think you need some assistance with, you've got some questions, you've got my contact information right here, my phone number, my email. I'm happy to answer questions.